It was 2 in the morning at the Skylark Diner, a grease-stained establishment clinging to the edge of the industrial district like a barnacle on a rusting hull. The air inside usually smelled of burnt bacon and floor wax, but tonight, the atmosphere had shifted. The air grew heavy, charged with the static electricity of violence, the moment the black SUVs pulled up to the curb. Their headlights cut through the gloom like searchlights in a prison yard, illuminating the rain that fell in sheets against the plate glass windows. Inside, Ash stood behind the counter, her hands moving with practiced, robotic efficiency as she dried a stack of ceramic plates. She was 26, with skin that glowed like polished obsidian under the harsh fluorescent buzzing overhead, and she wore the light blue uniform of the Skylark with a dignity that seemed to contradict the stains on her white apron. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a fixture, a ghost in the machine of the night shift. When the door chimed, it wasn't a welcome sound. It was a warning. 3 men entered first, their suits tailored to hide the bulges of holsters, their eyes scanning the room with the predatory boredom of wolves entering a sheep pen. They secured the corners, their presence driving the few remaining truck drivers to hastily drop cash on their tables and scurry out into the storm. Then he walked in. Dae-hyun, the prince of the Park Syndicate. He was devastatingly handsome, with high cheekbones that looked like they could cut glass and hair slicked back with severe precision, but his eyes were dead things, voids that swallowed the light. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than the diner itself, and he moved with the languid confidence of a man who knows that no one in the room would dare to breathe without his permission. He didn't look at the menu. He didn't look at his guards. He looked straight at Ash, his gaze stripping away the context of the diner and reducing her to an object of mild curiosity. He slid into the center booth, the red vinyl squeaking in protest, and snapped his fingers. It was a sharp, dismissive sound that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "Coffee," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the countertop. "Black. And try not to spill it, sweetheart." Ash didn't flinch. A lesser woman would have trembled. A smarter woman would have run. But Ash simply set down the towel, her movements deliberate and slow, refusing to grant him the satisfaction of a reaction. She could feel the eyes of his henchmen boring into her back, a physical weight of threat and lechery, but her heartbeat remained steady, a rhythmic war drum in her chest. As she walked toward the brewing station, she wasn't thinking about the danger. She was thinking about the irony. He called her sweetheart because he saw a waitress. If he looked closer, he would have seen the scar hidden beneath her collar, a souvenir from a life he thought he had extinguished years ago. She grabbed the pot, the glass hot against her palm, and turned. The walk to table 4 felt like crossing a minefield. The fluorescent lights hummed louder, or perhaps that was just the adrenaline flooding her system, sharpening her senses until the world became a hyper-real tapestry of details. She noticed the mud on Dae-hyun's Italian leather shoes, red clay, specific to the shipping yards at the docks. She noticed the way his right hand rested near his lapel, guarding something, perhaps a weapon, perhaps a letter. And she noticed the way he watched her, a smirk playing on his lips, expecting her to be flustered by his beauty or his power. She reached the table and poured the coffee. The stream of dark liquid was steady, creating a perfect circle of steam rising between them. "Is there anything else?" Ash asked, her voice cool, devoid of the subservience he was clearly accustomed to. Dae-hyun looked up, his smirk widening into something more wolfish. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the sticky table, invading her personal space with the scent of sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and the metallic tang of rain. "You're new," he observed, not asking but stating. The old woman who usually works this shift. She knew better than to make eye contact. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her hand as she held the pot. His skin was cold, contrasting with the heat of the coffee. "You have steady hands for a girl working the graveyard shift in this part of town. Most people shake when I walk in. Why aren't you shaking?" The question hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in velvet. His henchman chuckled, a low, sycophantic sound from the booth behind him. One of them, a brute named June with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, called out, "Maybe she doesn't know who you are, boss. Maybe she needs a lesson in local politics." Dae-hyun didn't look away from Ash's face. He was searching for fear, for that flicker of panic that fueled his ego. But all he found was a placid lake, dark and deep, reflecting his own arrogance back at him. "I know who you are," Ash said, pulling her hand away slowly, breaking his contact. "And I know that even kings bleed if they step on glass." The silence that followed her words was absolute. It wasn't the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a held breath before the plunge. The humor vanished from Daehyun's face instantly, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. His pupils dilated. The air in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. He wasn't used to defiance, certainly not from the help, and certainly not from a woman in a polyester uniform. But Ash wasn't finished. As she placed the creamer on the table, something he hadn't asked for, she let her gaze drop to his wrist. Specifically to the platinum cufflinks glinting under the lights. They were shaped like intricate tigers, eyes set with tiny rubies. To anyone else, they were just gaudy jewelry. To Ash, they were a confession. They were the sigil of the inner circle, the mark of the men who had orchestrated the accident at the chemical plant 5 years ago. The accident that hadn't just killed workers, it had erased families to cover up a smuggling operation, including hers. She felt a phantom burning on her skin, the heat of that night, but she forced it down into the pit of her stomach, turning it into fuel. "Black coffee," Ash said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. Just like the smoke over the Incheon warehouse in 2019. It took 3 days for the ash to settle. "Do you remember the smell, Mr. Park? Or were you too busy counting the insurance money?" The effect was immediate. Daehyun stiffened as if he had been electrocuted. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, not gently this time, but with a bruising grip that promised violence. The playful facade was gone. The monster was awake. "Who are you?" he hissed, his voice lethal. "Who sent you? Is it the Triad? The Russians?" He twisted her arm slightly, trying to force a wince, trying to regain the dominance he had lost in a single sentence. But Ash didn't pull away. She leaned into the pain, her face inches from his. This was the moment of the cold open, the twist realized. The hunter had stepped into the trap. "No one sent me," she replied, her eyes locking onto his with a terrifying intensity. "I'm just the loose end your father forgot to burn." June was out of his booth in a second, his chair clattering to the floor. "Boss," he shouted, hand reaching for the inside of his jacket. The other guard was already moving to lock the front door. Flipping the sign to "closed," the diner was no longer a place of business. It was a kill box. Daehyun held up a hand, stopping his men in their tracks, but his eyes never left Ash. He was dissecting her now, analyzing the threat. He saw the calluses on her fingers, not from scrubbing dishes, but from something else. Something tactical. He realized with a jolt of shock that the waitress dress was a costume, a camouflage that he had foolishly fallen for. The adrenaline spiked in his blood, but mixed with it was something confusing, something perverse. He was intrigued. He had spent his life surrounded by people who feared him or wanted to use him. Here was a woman who looked at him with pure, unadulterated hatred, and she was beautiful in her rage. "My father left many things unburned," Daehyun said softly, releasing her wrist but keeping his hand hovering near hers, a magnetic tension building between them. "He is a careless man. But I am not." "We'll see," Ash replied, rubbing her wrist where his fingers had left red marks against her dark skin. She stepped back, putting the counter between them again, creating a barrier that felt fragile against the violence escalating in the room. Careless men create their own executioners. "You drink your coffee, Daehyun. It might be the last thing you taste that isn't blood." The dialogue was melodramatic, heightened, spoken like lines in a play where the actors know the curtain is falling. The tension was suffocating. Daehyun laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He was reevaluating the board. He had come here for a quick stop before a meeting, and now he was in a standoff with a ghost from the syndicate's past. He signaled June to stand down, but to keep his weapon ready. "You have courage," Daehyun admitted, picking up the cup. "Or you have a death wish. Usually, they are the same thing." He took a sip, his eyes mocking her over the rim. "So, you know the family secrets. The dark history. What is your plan? To poison me? This coffee tastes fine." "I don't need poison," Ash said, her hand drifting beneath the counter, fingers brushing against the cold steel of the shotgun taped there. "I just need you to be exactly where you are." And then the world exploded. It wasn't Ash who fired. It wasn't Dae-hyun. The entire front window of the Skylark shattered inward in a shower of diamond-like glass shards as automatic gunfire raked the diner from the street. The roar was deafening, a chaotic symphony of destruction. Bullets tore through the red vinyl booths, exploded the ketchup bottles into red mist, and sparked against the chrome napkin holders. Dae-hyun was thrown from his seat, not by the impact, but by instinct, diving for the floor. But he wasn't fast enough. A bullet clipped his shoulder, spinning him around, leaving him exposed on the linoleum. June was down, screaming, clutching his leg. The assassins outside were professional, precise, and they were moving in to finish the job. Dae-hyun scrambled, his gun lost under the table, his eyes wide with the sudden realization of his own mortality. He looked up, expecting the final darkness. Instead, he saw blue. Ash vaulted over the counter, moving with the fluidity of a jungle cat. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like an avenging angel. She landed in front of him, the shotgun in her hands, pumping the action with a sound that cut through the ringing in his ears. She wasn't trying to kill him. She was standing between him and the door. The irony crashed into him harder than the bullet. The woman who wanted him dead was the only thing keeping him alive. The deafening roar of the shotgun blast seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the room, replacing the smell of stale coffee with the acrid, metallic biting scent of cordite. Ash didn't hesitate. She was a blur of motion, a kinetic force of nature that defied the stillness of the diner. She racked the slide again, clack clack, a sound that was both mechanical and terrifyingly final. The buckshot had turned the mahogany frame of the entrance into splinters, buying them exactly 3 seconds of hesitation from the kill squad outside. In that brief window, the power dynamic in the room shifted tectonically. Dae-hyun, the prince of the Park Syndicate, the man who commanded armies of enforcers, was on his knees, clutching a bleeding shoulder, looking up at the woman he had dismissed as a servant. He saw the way she planted her feet, the tactical distribution of her weight, the cold calculation in her eyes that assessed angles of fire and cover. She wasn't just defending herself, she was securing the asset. And much to his humiliation and fascination, he was the asset. "Move," she commanded, not with a shout, but with a low, guttural order that brooked no argument. She grabbed the collar of his ruined Italian suit, hauling him up with a strength that belied her slender frame. "Kitchen. Now." They scrambled over the debris, glass crunching under their feet like broken diamonds. Bullets began to chew through the walls again, punching holes in the drywall and sending plumes of white dust into the air, mixing with the steam escaping from the ruptured espresso machine. The sensory overload was intense, the flashing muzzle flashes from the street illuminating the diner in strobe light horror, the screaming of the injured June, the shattering of plates. Dae-hyun stumbled, his vision blurring from shock, but Ash didn't let him fall. She shoved him through the swinging metal doors of the kitchen into a world of stainless steel and grease. The change in atmosphere was jarring. The front was chaos, but the kitchen was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Ash didn't stop. She kicked a heavy prep table across the door they had just come through, barricading it. "The back exit is rigged," she said, her voice tight. "We have to go through the basement." Dae-hyun looked at her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "My men," he started, his voice weak, "are dead or dying." She cut him off, her eyes blazing. "And unless you want to join them, you will follow me. The people outside aren't just hitmen, Dae-hyun. They're cleaners, they don't leave witnesses. And they don't miss." She grabbed a serrated knife from the magnetic strip on the wall, shoving it into his good hand. The weight of the handle felt foreign, primitive. He was used to giving orders, not fighting for his life in a grease-trapped dungeon. But as he looked at Ash, illuminated by the flickering emergency light, he realized that his survival depended entirely on the woman who wanted to destroy him. The basement was a labyrinth of shadows and damp concrete, smelling of mold and ancient plumbing. It was the underbelly of the city, a place where the rats lived, and for the moment, they were the rats. Ash led him through the darkness with a familiarity that suggested she had memorized the blueprints of this building long before she ever put on the apron. Every step sent a jolt of agony through Dae-hyun's shoulder, but the adrenaline kept him moving. He watched her back, the way her muscles coiled and released, the way she checked corners with a shotgun barrel leading the way. You planned this, he whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the narrow corridor. You knew they were coming. Ash paused at a heavy iron door, her hand hovering over the latch. She turned to look at him, her face half in shadow, looking like a noir painting brought to life. I knew someone was coming, she corrected, her tone icy. I just didn't expect them to be on your payroll, the accusation hung in the dank air. Dae-hyun frowned, confusion warring with the pain. My peril? Those men wore the insignia of the Red Lotus on their vests, she finished for him. Your father's personal guard. You aren't being hunted by rivals, little prince. You're being pruned from the family tree. The revelation hit him harder than the bullet. The Red Lotus. His father's elite executioners. The betrayal was so absolute, so monstrous, that his mind refused to process it at first. But the logic was cold and undeniable. He had been asking questions about the shipping manifests, about the old chemical plant fires. He had been getting too close to the rot at the heart of the empire. Ash shoved the door open, revealing the rain-slicked alleyway behind the diner. The storm was raging harder now, the wind howling like a banshee. Her car, a rusted, nondescript sedan that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, was parked under the shadow of a dumpster. Get in, she ordered, unlocking the door. And keep your head down. As he slid into the passenger seat, the smell of old upholstery and vanilla air freshener filling his nose, Dae-hyun looked at the woman sliding into the driver's seat. She tossed the shotgun into the back, the weapon clattering against piles of files and surveillance gear. She wasn't a waitress. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a hunter who had been waiting for the right moment to strike, and now, fate had handcuffed them together. The engine roared to life with a cough and a sputter, and as they peeled out of the alley, leaving the burning diner behind in the rearview mirror, Dae-hyun realized that the dangerous part of his night wasn't the shootout. It was being alone in a car with Ash. The safe house was less of a home and more of a bunker disguised as a studio apartment. It was located in the tangled veins of the city's old district, where the buildings leaned against each other like drunkards and the streetlights had long since been shot out. Inside, the air was stagnant, smelling of dust, rubbing alcohol, and the faint, lingering scent of lavender soap, a stark, feminine contrast to the harsh utility of the space. Maps and photos were taped to the walls, a chaotic mosaic of the park syndicate's operations, connected by red string like a conspiracy theorist's web. Dae-hyun sat on the edge of the narrow bed, his shirt stripped off, shivering slightly as the shock began to settle in. The room was dim, lit only by the amber glow of a street lamp filtering through the blinds, casting stripes of light and shadow across his torso. He watched Ash as she gathered supplies, gauze, antiseptic, a needle, and thread. She moved without the frantic energy of the diner. Here, she was methodical, surgical. She placed a bottle of cheap whiskey on the nightstand next to him. Drink, she said. I don't have lidocaine, and this is going to hurt. Dae-hyun took a long pull from the bottle, the liquid fire burning his throat, grounding him. He looked at the woman preparing to sew his flesh back together. Why? He asked, the word heavy in the quiet room. You hate me. You hate my family. You could have let the Red Lotus finish the job. You could have walked away and let the monsters eat each other. Ash paused, the needle hovering over the open wound on his shoulder. Her eyes met his, dark and unreadable. Pools of ancient anger. Because death is too easy for you, she whispered, leaning in close. He could feel her breath on his skin, cool against his feverish heat. If you die, you become a martyr. A tragedy. Your father spins the story, uses your death to consolidate power. I don't want you dead, Dae-hyun. I want you to burn everything down. She pressed the antiseptic pad to the wound. He hissed, his hand gripping the bedsheets until his knuckles turned white. She didn't apologize. She just began to stitch, her fingers deft and steady against his skin. The physical intimacy of the moment was suffocating. The blood, the pain, the proximity. It was a perverse subversion of a romantic embrace. My father, Dae-hyun gritted out, the pain sharpening his mind. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'm soft because I didn't want to expand into the human trafficking routes. He looked at the photos on the wall, seeing his own face in some of them, captured through a telephoto lens. You've been watching me for a long time. Ash tied off the stitch and snipped the thread with her teeth, a gesture so raw it made his stomach flip. I've been watching for 5 years, she said, tossing the bloody gauze into a metal bin. I saw you at the funeral of the workers. I saw you trying to pay the families out of your own pocket, quietly, so the board wouldn't know. She stood up, wiping her hands on a rag. That's why you're alive. Not because I forgive you, but because you have a conscience. It's a small, shriveled thing, buried under layers of silk and arrogance, but it's there. She walked to the window, peering out through the blinds. We have until morning. The Red Lotus will sweep the city. If we stay here, we die. If we run, we die. Dae-hyun stood up, testing his shoulder. It throbbed, but the bleeding had stopped. He walked up behind her, close enough to smell the rain still clinging to her hair. The power dynamic had shifted again. They were no longer predator and prey. They were partners in a foxhole. We don't run, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, commanding baritone. We go to the source. Tomorrow night is the Platinum Gala. The entire board will be there. My father will be there. He reached out, his hand hovering near her waist, not touching, but close enough to feel the heat. You have the evidence. I have the access. We walk in through the front door. Ash turned to face him. The tension in the room was electric, a volatile mix of hatred, respect, and something darker, more magnetic. Suicide, she said flatly. Vindication, he countered. We expose them. We destroy the legacy. And then he paused, his eyes searching hers. And then, if you still want to kill me, I won't stop you. Ash held his gaze for a long moment, the silence stretching taut like a piano wire. Finally, the corner of her mouth twitched up, not a smile, but a grimace of agreement. Deal, she said. But you carry your own gun this time. The preparation was a montage of cold steel and silk, a transformation that felt like armoring up for war. The next 24 hours were a blur of strategy and tension. Ash pulled a sleek, black evening gown from the back of her closet, a relic from a previous undercover life, while Dae-hyun called in the only favor he had left, a tailor who owed him his life, to bring a tuxedo to the safe house. The visual contrast was striking, the gritty, peeling wallpaper of the apartment serving as the backdrop for two people dressing for the most exclusive event of the year. Ash strapped a thigh holster beneath the high slit of the velvet dress, the cold metal of a compact pistol resting against her skin. She applied makeup not to beautify, but to mask, sharpening her features, turning her face into a weapon of distraction. Dae-hyun watched her, buttoning his crisp white shirt with his good hand. The injury slowed him down, forcing him to rely on her help for the cufflinks, the same tiger cufflinks he had worn in the diner. As she fastened them, her fingers brushing his wrists, the air between them grew heavy again. You keep these? She asked, her voice low. Reminders, he replied, of what I need to atone for. They arrived at the Platinum Gala in a stolen luxury sedan, blending in with the parade of limousines depositing the city's corrupt elite. The hotel ballroom was a cavern of opulence, crystal chandeliers dripping light, mountains of shrimp on ice, and the murmuring of billionaires trading lives like stocks. The air smelled of expensive perfume and moral decay. As they entered, heads turned. Not just because Dae-hyun was supposed to be missing or dead, but because of the woman on his arm. Ash was radiant, a dark star absorbing the light, moving with a regal grace that made the socialites look like amateurs. But beneath the glamour, they were coiled springs. Smile, Dae-hyun whispered, his hand warm on the small of her back. You're the love interest tonight. Not the executioner. I can be both, she murmured back, her eyes scanning the room, marking targets. She spotted the Red Lotus guards positioned at the exits, their earpieces the only giveaway in their tuxedos. They had walked into the lion's den, and the lions were hungry. At the center of the room, holding court, was Chairman Park, an older, withered version of Dae-hyun, with eyes like frozen chips of flint. He was laughing with a senator, a glass of champagne in his hand, completely unaware that his ghost had just walked in the door. The plan was simple. Get to the podium, hijack the feed, and broadcast the drive Ash had spent 5 years filling with proof of the syndicate's atrocities. But plans rarely survive contact with the enemy. As they moved through the crowd, a hand clamped onto Dae-hyun's uninjured shoulder. It was June, miraculously alive, limping heavily, his face pale and sweating. But he wasn't alone. He was flanked by 3 security guards. "Boss," June rasped, his eyes darting nervously. "Your father. He knows. He's waiting for you in the private study upstairs. He says if you make a scene here, he detonates the gas lines in the basement. Everyone dies." The threat was a bucket of ice water. The public reveal was a trap. Ash stiffened, her hand drifting toward her thigh. Dae-hyun tightened his grip on her waist, stopping her. "He's bluffing," Dae-hyun said, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "He wouldn't destroy his own power base. He would if it meant stopping the leak," Ash whispered. "We have to split up. I'll take the basement. You take the father." It was the near-death experience set up. They had to separate to save the whole. Dae-hyun looked at her, realizing this might be the last time he saw her. "Don't die," he commanded. "I still owe you a drink," Ash smirked, slipping away into the crowd like smoke. "Make it a double." The climax exploded not with a bang, but with a voice. Dae-hyun kicked open the double doors to the private study, startling the chairman. The old man sat behind a massive oak desk, a pistol resting on the blotter. "You disappoint me, son," the chairman sighed, looking at Dae-hyun with profound weariness. Consorting with the help. Trying to grow a conscience, Dae-hyun didn't waste words. He walked forward, the barrel of his father's gun raising to meet him. "It wasn't a conscience, father," Dae-hyun said, his voice filling the room. It was survival. Meanwhile, in the basement, Ash was fighting a war in a ball gown. She had taken out 2 guards with efficient, brutal strikes, her dress torn, her heels discarded. She found the gas main, rigged with C4. A timer was ticking down. 30 seconds. She didn't have tools. She only had instincts. Back in the study, the chairman pulled the trigger. Click. Dae-hyun didn't flinch. He held up the firing pin he had removed from the gun years ago, a paranoid insurance policy he had kept since he was a teenager. "You taught me to trust no one," Dae-hyun said coldly. He crossed the room and struck his father, a single, decisive blow that knocked the old man unconscious. At the exact same moment, the ballroom screens flickered. The music died. Ash, having bypassed the bomb by cutting the power to the detonator receiver, had patched the drive directly into the hotel's server from the basement maintenance room. The giant screens above the stage, previously showing stock loops, suddenly displayed grainy footage of the chemical plant fire. Then documents. Bank transfers. Emails ordering the hits. The crowd gasped, a collective sound of shock that rippled through the hall. The illusion was shattered. The police sirens, tipped off by Ash hours ago, began to wail outside, a symphony of justice approaching. Dae-hyun stood over his father, watching his empire crumble on a private monitor. He felt a strange lightness, a lifting of a burden he had carried since birth. He wasn't the prince anymore. He was just a man. He turned and ran, not away from the police, but toward the basement. He found Ash sitting on a crate, breathless, smeared with grease, holding her shoes in her hand. She looked up, exhausted but triumphant. "Did we win?" she asked. Dae-hyun knelt before her, ruining his tuxedo pants on the dirty floor, and took her face in his hands. "The world is watching them fall," he said. "We won." He kissed her then, a collision of relief and adrenaline, tasting of blood and victory. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was a promise sealed in the wreckage of their old lives. The aftermath was a media storm that lasted for months. The trials were televised, the Park Syndicate dismantled piece by piece. But the 2 people who started the fire were nowhere to be found. They had vanished into the ether, leaving behind only rumors. The final scene opens on a small, sun-drenched beach in a country with no extradition treaty. A small cafe overlooks the turquoise water. Ash is there, wearing a simple white dress, no apron in sight. She is sitting at a table, reading a newspaper with a headline, "Corruption Purge Complete." A shadow falls over the table. She looks up to see Dae-hyun, holding 2 cups of coffee. He looks different, lighter, the darkness in his eyes replaced by the reflection of the sea. He places the cup down. "Black," he says, a playful smirk on his lips. "And I didn't spill it." Ash smiles, a genuine, radiant smile that reaches her eyes. She takes the coffee, her fingers brushing his. "You're learning," she teases. "They aren't looking at the past anymore. They are looking at the future. And that, my friends, is why you never judge a book by its cover, and you never underestimate the waitress." She didn't just serve him coffee. She served him his destiny. So, what would you have done in Ash's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay sharp, stay dangerous, and keep watching.